Since the release of its first season back in 2018, it didn't take long for Manifest to become the biggest science fiction show in the history of NBC, which is why fans were surprised when the network canceled the series and allowed Netflix to bring it back for a fourth season. But what do we really know about this continuation, and which Manifest theories are fans currently living by? For all this and more, stay tuned. First of all, let's tackle Adrian's idea that the Callings are actually evil. For those of you who don't know, Manifest revolves around the lives of the passengers of Flight 828, who after being presumed dead for 5 years, reappear out of thin air to the surprise of the rest of the world. But that's not all. One by one, the passengers start to experience visions of the future, which they later refer to as callings. As of right now, nobody seems to know what those callings are, with some people believing they are messages from a higher power that will allow the passengers to help others. That being said, Adrian Shannon has a different opinion. The antagonistic figure, who is brought to life by Jared Grimes, tends to believe that these visions are evil, regardless of how they have been used in the past to solve crimes and help those who were most in danger. And as it turns out, there are a few fans who agree with Adrian's thinking. You see, the idea behind this theory is that the callings are being used to manipulate the passengers of Flight 828 into doing the bidding of those who kidnapped them all those years ago. The antagonist even goes as far as to mention that these callings are meant to fix the mistakes that these masters have made in the past. In the end, the goodness that resulted from the following of the callings was meant to do nothing more than gain the trust of the supernaturally touched passengers, with true malice to follow. But does this theory have any real following when it comes to the fans? Well, you wouldn't think so, considering how Adrian is one of the most hated characters on the show. But as of right now, his theory hasn't been debunked. And it would be pretty crazy if we found out we were supporting the end of the Earth in some way when Season 4 finally comes around. This explains why a small group of fans have adopted the theory as their own, stating that the callings being visions from God amounts to nothing more than lazy writing if true. And if you really think about it, why would God only be speaking to those who disappeared all those years ago? Doesn't it make more sense that some other nefarious force was behind their kidnapping and is now manipulating them to put some plan into motion? Many have piggybacked off this theory and pointed in the direction of demonic forces that are truly responsible for the callings. But in the end, they could have nothing to do with anything in the biblical sense. We tend to see things like that because of how entrenched Christianity is in Western society. But what makes more sense is that the origin of the callings is alien in nature. This is often the case when we hear about groups of people disappearing and losing time, after all. So, when Season 4 rolls around, we might finally learn that the passengers of Flight 828 were the victims of an alien race. Wouldn't that be dramatic? Other fans believe that the callings are more like a final boss in a video game. And while this might sound a bit ridiculous on the surface, it actually has quite a bit of support when you read up on the various posts plastered around Reddit. According to the theory, the callings are actually there to test the passengers of Flight 828. These visions present each and every passenger with the opportunity to do good, with the completion of these acts placing them above those who refuse to act when evil is about. Think of it as a hero's journey. If the hero never chooses to defeat evil, the story will never end. But if the hero does their duty and rises to the occasion, the story comes to an end with the hero finally being heralded as such. In the same sense, the callings could very well be the final test that these passengers have to pass before being let back into the world. By beating the so-called Death Day, these passengers are able to return to society as if they could have never been on Flight 828 in the first place. Just look at the return of Cal, and you'll see what these fans are talking about. By following what the callings wanted him to do with the tail fin, he was finally able to escape the horrible situation that he had found himself in. So, could it be possible that the passengers are actually in limbo, with the callings being the final test to allow them to get into heaven? Maybe. A large group of fans also seems to think that Manifest is going multiversal. This wouldn't be at all surprising, considering how popular the term multiverse has become since the Spider-Man franchise set the world on fire with the notion. But if you're really looking at the show with eagle eyes, you'll see that a dual reality has actually been set up throughout its entire runtime. In this sense, the callings could actually be more of a plot device used by a bigger power to move one reality closer to another. If multiversal theory is indeed what the showrunners are moving towards, there is one reality where the plane crashed and another where it landed safely at its destination. This is why the proponents of the theory believe that the callings are actually being used to right a wrong. Rather than guiding the passengers towards good, they are guiding the passengers towards a reality where Flight 828 never crashed, allowing for these two realities to merge and things to go back to normal before the supernatural situation even took hold. In other words, it's on the passengers of the flight to determine their future. Those who choose to ignore the callings will remain in the world where the aircraft crashed, while those who choose to follow the callings might be presented with the chance to return to a world without the life-altering crash that made them social pariahs. It's a bit of a stretch, but since multiversal theory is so hot right now, we wouldn't want want to put it past Netflix to take advantage of. Another fan theory seems to suggest that a beloved character might be back. We are, of course, referring to the idea that Evie will be making a return despite having been dead all this time. For those of you who need a bit of a reminder, Evie played an incredibly important role in Mick's story arc. Although she has been dead for the entirety of the show, it's her death and closeness to Mick that really developed him as a character. And some Redditors seem to think that she will be returning in the future when Mick's journey finally comes to an end. What evidence is there of this, though? Well, the young theorists believe that the Callings are actually dedicated to the striking of balance in the universe. The unfortunate demise of Grace seemed to coincide with the return of Cal, and while this could have been nothing more than a coincidence, the theory poses that the passengers of Flight 828 can only return to their lives if another is sacrificed in their stead. In other words, one character needs to die for another to be revived. And what better way to bring Mick's character arc to an end than to allow him to sacrifice himself for Evie and bring her back with his own actions? It's something that will serve as a cherry on top of an already expansive journey, and we're guessing that the return of Evie will be one of the most surprising moments in the history of the show. In other words, why not? Lastly, we have the simulation theory, which draws heavy Matrix comparisons. It goes without saying that Manifest as a show has resulted in some of the biggest twists, all of which still need to be explained away with some or other supernatural reasoning. But what if things were less supernatural all of this time? The show has drawn heavy comparisons with Lost, for example, which was also considered to be supernatural before the ending showed that the characters were actually in limbo all that time. But since the limbo idea has already been done, fans have been thinking about a Matrix comparison, which will shock the audience by showing them that the passengers were in a simulation all this time. It's a definite possibility, considering the weird and wonderful things that have been happening in the past 3 seasons. But we have a feeling this type of ending will be rather disappointing. Fans want true answers, after all, not a dream world where anything is possible. And there you have it, everything you need to know about the future of Manifest. Which is your favorite fan theory? And what are you expecting from the 4th season of the show? Feel free to let us know in the comments section down below.